All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 2 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross this time-space continuum, the place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. until midnight, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network and on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, streaming at classic1220.ca. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@classic1220.ca is the best email to reach me at. And if you'd like to see the other programming that is available for you, with our compliments, check out xzbn.net. My guest this hour is a gentleman I had the pleasure of meeting several years ago when I first started at CJBK in London, Ontario. He was the morning talk show guy, and everybody that I know had the greatest respect for this gentleman. He is an author, he is a journalist, a former broadcaster, NDE survivor, and a musician. Joining me now is a gentleman that I had the pleasure of working for and with in London, Ontario, Jim Chapman. And Jim, always great having you. How are you, my friend?
Well, I'm very well, Rob, although I hardly recognize myself from that wonderful introduction. That's very kind of you.
Jim, for our listeners who may not have had the opportunity of listening to you when you were at CJBK or the other areas of broadcasting that you were in, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, I started my career, my professional career as a musician, and I earned my living as a musician until I was in my 40s. And at that point, there's a very strange set of circumstances that probably don't bear repeating, but I was offered a talk show host a job in London at a small station. I had not done anything like that, but Lord knows I knew how to talk, and I'd always kept myself very well informed about current affairs. I was always interested in that. So I actually gave a little speech one day to a group of people that had invited me to come and talk to them, and a fellow in the audience worked at the station, and he offered me a job, and I took the job, and for the next 15 years, I did talk shows in London at several different stations, as it turned out, and had the most wonderful time of my professional life that didn't involve a guitar.
Jim, you and I were talking before we started on air, and broadcasting has changed so much in the last couple of years. How do you make sense of what's happening, Jim? Because you've always had your fingers to the pulse when it comes to the broadcast media industry.
I left finally in 2013, and I left of my own accord. I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do what they wanted to be done. When I started in radio, provided you didn't you break the Canadian Association of Broadcasters rules, you could say anything you wanted. Mm-hmm. You couldn't be rude, you couldn't swear on air, but you could express your opinions freely and fully. By the time the more formal part of my career ended, and that would have been in 2004. After that, I did 2 more radio shows, but they were just kind of part-time things. But my full-time career ended in 2004, and I was let go largely because they didn't like some of the things I was saying. I was not a fan of political correctness. I thought it was going to lead to some terrible social disruption, and it turns out I was 100% correct in that. and I refused to play by those rules. So I left, and it was mutually agreed that they didn't want me anymore, and I don't want to be here. But I watched very carefully after that, because I said I still stayed sort of in the business. I did a couple of part-time shows. I was doing a bunch of other stuff, but I was approached to do an hour here, an hour there, and I always enjoyed it. My observation, succinctly, is that the bean counters took over the entire business. Radio was built and expanded and became as powerful as it was because of radio people. People who owned the stations and ran the stations, who loved radio, who believed in the power of radio. And once they were gone, and they were, because there was a convergence back in the late 1990s and then into the early 2000s, and you went through that too, where huge conglomerates just bought up every radio station there was. At one time, you could only own 2 stations in one market, as you know, and now there are chains that own hundreds of stations. So the big money came out. These guys thought they were all going to get rich, and they bought all these radio stations. In fact, I don't think any of them are not only are they not getting rich, I don't think any of them are making any real money anymore. Because the bean counters come in and they just, how can I squeeze another dollar out of this radio? Oh, reporters? Well, we don't need reporters. We'll get rid of them. Oh, we've got a talk show or a host, a morning show host who's been there for 30 years. This happened in London here, the most popular guy in the city. Well, I can get somebody for half the price that'll do that job. And it's like that all over the country. So very, very few older broadcasters left anywhere anymore, and the young ones either don't have the experience or don't have the skill. And the management guys, they're just sitting there counting beans. They don't count human beings. They don't count feelings. They don't count the impact that they have on their community or could have. They don't count all the good works that they could do that maybe don't turn into dollars in your pocket but are great for your community and for your advertising base.
Exactly.
All they count is beans, dollars, and that's it.
One of the stations I was at as executive producer and where the X Zone was, one day we all got called into the GM's office. He said, all right, you're going to all be called one by one to go to the boardroom. You go in there and see what happens. And, of course, we were all the senior people in the station at that time. And what happened was we were let go because of, like you said, bean counters. And it was referred to as the 2020 crowd was coming in to take it over. They were 20 years old and would do anything for $20,000 a year.
Yeah, and that's sadly, I've heard that before, and people have laughed at that. There's a lot more truth in fiction in that phrase, too. The 20 years old, I'm happy to get paid $20,000. If you're a bean counter and you don't care about radio and you don't really believe in radio, you believe in the numbers on a piece of paper, all you care about is maximizing your advertising dollars. And one way you maximize their value is by reducing the cost to make that air available to advertisers. The problem is, as the product degrades, which it inevitably does, you can't replace people with 20, 30, 40 years of experience on working a microphone with somebody just out of college. I don't care how bright the kid might be and motivated. It's not the same thing, and people know that, recognize that. So the advertising revenues start to drop, and rather than address the real issue, which is that your product is not your product, your radio product, people aren't listening to it anymore because they don't care about it. Instead of addressing that, we can say $30,000. We'll get rid of this guy over here, and we'll bring in somebody out of school. Yeah. It's a self-defeating strategy. I think we're in the very end days of it now. I think radio does not have much longer to last. All the radio stations, of course, are trying to switch over to the internet, and good for them that do. But the problem with the internet for the bean counters is that internet programming is driven entirely by appealing to your audience. If you don't appeal to that audience, you're not going to have one, and you can't pretend that you do like you can in radio. You can pretend that you're reaching a lot more people than you are. You can't do that because all the metrics are there for everybody to see on the internet. Yeah. So I think the stations that make the transition, that'd be great. What I'd love to see, I can't speak for the states. Not in Canada. I would like to see it. Will never happen because there's too much money invested. The best thing that could happen in radio in Canada would be to cancel all the existing licenses, issue all new licenses for small radio stations, and one in almost every community, with an absolute mandate to community service. That's why you're there.
Like the FM.
If you did that, I believe that as much as it's going to, I mean, one of the problems is there aren't AM radios in a lot of the new cars now, so that's a problem, and it's probably too late to do any of that. But had they done that 10, 15 years ago, I think they not only would have saved radio, they would have made it a vital and vibrant part of our communities like it used to be, and just isn't anymore. But too much money involved. Cancel those licenses. The licenses are on paper worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not really, because they don't make any money, so what's that worth? But anyhow, it's not going to happen. I wish it had. You know, a bunch of us talked about it 10, 15 years ago, old radio guys, and we kind of decided that if there was anything that would save it, that was it. But none of that. It just wasn't going to happen. It was never going to happen.
Well, that's happening in the States right now because the FCC is now issuing, what's it called, LPFM licenses, which are community licenses. And right now, there are over 1,700 licenses that have been issued to community radio stations within the United States. And it's catching on like wildfire.
I should be interested to hear how they're doing, because I'll bet if they're well run, if they're run by radio people, I'll bet they're doing well.
Yeah, and the reason I know that, Jim, is because a number of the LPFM stations are carrying the X Zone.
Oh,
and
glad to hear that.
The first time this gentleman contacted me, and I said, "Well, what's an LPFM?" He said, "Oh, you're in Canada." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You call them community stations." Wow. He says, "Well, we're looking." Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to say that I know there are some small stations around. If you hunt for them, you can still find them in Canada, but there aren't very many. And they're very specialized situations. They have special licenses that were grandfathered in that have been there for a long, long time. But the idea of having a community station that kind of circumvented the whole big station financial monopoly, right? It lets you guys keep your license. You keep your $100 million license. You do that. But we're going to let this guy here, and he's going to do all community programming. I think those stations, I'm absolutely convinced those stations properly run would make money and serve their communities, and everybody be happy.
I'll tell you what I'll do, Jim. I'll send you the information on the LPFMs, and you and I have to take our first break, my friend. So please stand.
I'm ready to rest whenever you are.
Okay. Exo Nation, my guest this hour is Jim Chapman, a gentleman that I had the great pleasure of working with at CJBK in London, Ontario, where the Exxon was for a number of months before we moved to our, let me see, where did we go from London? We went to CKTB here in St. Catharines. Good times. Hard work. That's what makes radio work. Hard work and hard and dedicated listeners. We'll be back on the other side of this break as the X-Zone continues with yours truly from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. And you're listening to us on your hometown radio, Classic 1220. Don't go away. And welcome back to the X-Zone. Jim Chapman is my very special guest. And Jim, as you know, we had Skippy working with us at the FM side of CJBK. What was the FM side?
BX93, Skip Prokop from Lighthouse, who just heard the band there, Yeah, Skip was a great guy. He and I became friends over the years, and of course we had a lot of mutual friends in the music business too. And he was an incredible drummer and singer-songwriter, and a super nice guy too.
The last time I saw,
we lost him a few years.
Yes,
ago,
we did. Yes, we did. And the last time I saw Skip, it was at the Winona Peach Festival. Lighthouse was playing there. And he saw me in the crowd, and he motioned to me to come onto the stage behind the curtain, and my little daughter was with me. And after the show, he came over, and she was thrilled. He gave her an autograph, and she still talks about meeting the man from Lighthouse to this very day.
Man from Lighthouse. Yeah, he certainly was.
Jim, do you think the internet is all it's made out to be when it comes to broadcast media?
Well, here's the thing. Here's my observation, and I have to tell you, Rob, that since I, quote, retired, although I'm busier now than I'd ever been, but I retired from my more mundane business things I was doing. I had a business consulting firm, a communications consulting firm for the last 10 years of what I consider my broadcasting career, and it was very successful, but it got to the point where I'd had enough. Mm-hmm. So that was in 2017 at Christmas I retired. But since then, I spend a lot of time every day on the internet, 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours a day on the internet for fun. But what I have, I won't say I discovered, I knew this going in, I think, but certainly it has been reinforced, is that the value of the internet is directly proportional to the amount of effort you put into verifying your sources. And because, as you know, if you believe A, you can, or B or C or D, you can find somebody on the internet somewhere who will agree with you 100%. And if that's the only person you listen to, you're not going to learn much.
No.
So the broadcast element, the radio stations moving onto the internet, I don't listen to a lot of them. I do on occasion listen to them. My observation is that they have been unable to recreate the kind of local connection that really drove even the biggest radio stations back in the day, the 50,000 waters that reached half the country.
Right.
They did that, but they also had a direct connection to their listeners. I'm not sure that's happening on the internet, on the broadcast side of things. On the information side, it is the most amazing resource I've ever seen. I grew up spending all my spare time at the library when I was a kid. I was a reader from when I was just, I can't remember literally when I couldn't read. And I spent, just thousands of hours in libraries. Now I do the same thing from the comfort of my home on my, my favorite comfy chair. And the world is at your fingertips. The problem is too many people only, the world's at their fingertips, but they're two-finger typists, and they only get a tiny slice of it. And I think there are times when that's very dangerous. People go, well, I heard it on the internet. It must be true. Yeah. When we're talking about the kinds of topics that that's why I like your show. I listen to your show.
Oh, thanks,
I like
Jim.
your show because, it's very straightforward. Here are people telling their stories. Here's what's happened to them. Here's what they believe. And, you don't try to push anything down people's throats, and neither do they. And everybody gets a chance to make up their own mind, which I think is wonderful. I think that's exactly the way everything should be.
But that, Jim...
of these other shows that... sorry, go ahead.
But, Jim, that's how you did your show. And I learned a lot from you.
Very much so.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot from you, and I learned a lot from Bill Kelly.
Well, for me, the thing that I always tried to do on the radio show, and maybe it was because I came to it late. I was in my 40s. I was already a fully formed adult, and with a lot of life experience because I'd done been through a lot of stuff. Sure. I believed. And a very wise man told me, this fellow named Peter Garland, who you'll remember was a talk show host, or not a talk show host, he was a morning radio host. Pete Garland and Steve Garrison were the two big talk show guys here in London for years and years, and they were both good friends of mine and kind of mentors of mine, and they both told me the same thing. He said, be yourself and tell the truth, and you never have to remember what you said yesterday, because it's the same thing that you would say today. And I ran my show that way. Here's what I understand. Here are the facts as I understand them. Mm-hmm. Here's a guest, and they're going to share their view on it. Now, you go away and make up your own mind. And that works very well for me. My show is very successful. I'm very, very proud of what we accomplished with that show. And I wish there were more of that today on what essentially is replaced radio, which is the internet. I wish there were more. There is a lot of it. There's a lot of people that I watch that I believe them, And I think that's what happened in radio with the hosts. I'm not talking about DJs, but I'm talking about talk show people in radio. The ones who are the most successful were the ones who were either so outrageous that you had to tune in to see what they were going to say next, like your Howard Stern, which never appealed to me. But yeah, lots of people loved that. Or people you believed. Somebody said, "This, as far as I know, this is the truth," and you went, "Well, okay. As far as he knows, a lot farther than I know, and I believe he cares about the truth, so I'll listen to him." Unfortunately, there are so many people out there today who, it's all clickbait stuff. They say almost anything to get an audience, to build an audience, and I don't think there's any way to fix it. I don't even know that it needs to be fixed, but I encourage, my kids and their kids, and just be a discriminating consumer of information. Take everything in, make the sense of it that you can with the good sense God gave you. Don't believe anything that doesn't sound reasonable. My dad once said, if it doesn't sound true, it probably isn't. And I found that's been fairly accurate over the years. Somebody tells you something, you don't believe them, then be careful about believing what they're telling you. Anyway, that's kind of my overview. I think the internet is a wonderful, wonderful resource. The world is literally at your fingertips. I spend at least 2 hours a day on top of the internet stuff. I just do it for fun. It's not that I have to, but I have the time. I do it for fun on YouTube, and you can travel the world through time and through space on YouTube. You could sit there 24 hours a day and never run out of interesting things to see. And I think that's incredible. Again, in the old days, you'd have to go down to the library, which I would do on Saturdays. You're going to spend all day in the library reading books, looking at books to travel, again, through time and space like you can now. Well, I can do it at home in front of my TV because the YouTube's right in front of my TV, and the whole world is curated. The comedy and drama and history and news and weather and sport, all of that stuff for the last however many years. It's right in front of you. Plus all the sci-fi stuff, the future stuff, and the kind of stuff that you deal with, as you know very well. There's lots of it out there. Yeah. It's an absolute cornucopia. I had a young fella say to me the other day. I was talking to a young fella. I was actually out doing a musical gig, and he came up and wanted to talk to me because he just started to play guitar. And this is my 60th year this year since I had my first paid job as a musician. God. And he said, "I know you've been playing for a long time, Mr. Chapman, and I just want to tell you, I'd really like to do what you do." And I said, "Well, that's great. And so you're learning the instrument?" "Well, yeah." I said, "But I get kind of bored doing it." And I said, "Oh, you get bored?" Yeah. I said, "Well, what else bores you?" "Well, I don't know. I just find life kind of boring." And I said, "Well, good luck to you, son." I cannot imagine I can't imagine me ever saying that I'm bored. Those two words. I've never said them in my life. I can't imagine ever saying them. There's so much stuff out there, Robin, because you're the same way. You're like I am. You're always looking for information. You're looking for new experiences and new thoughts and new attitudes and new theories and whatever. So as I say, I tell my kids, just keep your minds open and fill them with everything you can find, and then you figure out what works for you.
Explanation. My guest this hour is Jim Chapman. Now, if you'd like to find out more about Jim, he has a Facebook page. It is facebook.com/Jim.Chapman.9237. That's Jim.Chapman.9237. Jim, what was your most, what's the word I'm looking for? Your most significant story that you did as a talk show host that will always be with you?
Oh, I can tell you that for sure. Just before I do that, Rob, if I can mention too, I also have a website, jimchapman.ca. So there's lots of stuff there about what we're going to talk about, lots of other stuff. Without a doubt, the most amazing day of my career was 9/11. Yeah. And not just because it was 9/11. I'll tell you what happened. I was just about to go on the air. I started at 9 o'clock. One of the kids from the newsroom ran in and said a plane has just hit the World Trade Center in New York. And my first thought went back to 1942 when an American bomber, a B-25, hit the Empire State Building. Mm-hmm. And it's a famous event, maybe not famous today, but famous event. And I thought, well, some poor guy's turned left when he should have turned right and hit a building, and so let's get on the air and see what's happening. So I went into the studio, and they did a news announcement, and then, as I recall, didn't do the newscast. I immediately went on the air, and said, "Here's what we know." And I had a TV in the studio where I was, so we're watching the video feed. And at that point, nobody knew anything. This was before the second plane hit. And I told the story about the bomber running into the Empire State Building. I said the crew of the bomber was killed. I don't think anybody else was, and it didn't hurt the building any. So let's hope that something like that. And while I am talking, literally, and you're familiar with this, and your listeners will be too, here's the video of the second plane flying into the building. And at that point, we knew right away that something was grievously wrong. This was not an accident. And over the next 10 or 15, till about the bottom of the hour, I was given backstory. I was talking about the layout. I've been to New York. I have family in New York, and about the layout, where the World Trade Center was, where the airports were relative to that. What might have happened, who knows, yada, yada, yada. And at the bottom of the hour, one of the station guys came in and said, "Well, we're going to switch to the network now. You're done for the day." And the news director, Ed Wilmot, and I were in the room and said, "That's absolutely the wrong thing to do. They don't know any more than we do right now. And anything that they're learning, they're putting up on the screen so we could see that. But if we cut away now, there's no reason for anybody to stay with our radio station. They'll just go to the nearest TV station, or they'll get the CBC, or they don't need us."
Jim, stand by. I've got to take my break at the bottom of the hour. Please stand by. Exo Nation, our guest this hour is Jim Chapman. And Jim, I believe your website is jimchapman.com?
.ca.
jimchapman.ca. And Jim and I will be back on the other side as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network and on your hometown radio, classic1220.ca is the stream. Don't go away. Jim Chapman is my special guest, Exo Nation, www.jimchapman.ca, and on Facebook, facebook.com/jim.chapman.9237. Jim, we were talking about 9/11, and you're right. Radio plays a very important part in every community. And please continue with what you were saying.
Well, that story, Robin, you said exactly the right thing. The reason I'm telling that story is what happened as a result of us staying on the air and not going to just cut it. And we because of our affiliations, we would have cut in with the ABC network. Well, as the day went on, and we're watching ABC on television, so we're getting all the stuff they had. Mm-hmm. I also had my staff. I was lucky to have a wonderful producer named Kathleen Keating, who I'm sure you would remember.
Yes,
Kathleen
I do.
had staff that worked for her.
Yeah.
She had some volunteers from the journalism school regularly. So I got them on the phone. They contacted some of my family members in New York, one of whom had just moments before seen the second plane go over her head and into the building. And several other of my relatives down there. So we're getting first-hand reports from the streets of New York. One of our regular advertisers, or a lawyer, Mike Peerless, called in. He had just got into the city, had flown into New York on business, and was downtown watching the dust settle, on everything. He was just remarkable. And he was a very well-spoken, he's a lawyer, so we're getting, moment-by-moment description of what's happening in downtown New York from him. I had all kinds of people. Just get them on, airplane people and building structural people. I was on the air for most of the day, and with some of the other guys whose shows I kind of crashed over, we would go work together on something. But I was on the air from 9 till 6 basically that day, and everybody at the station just worked their heads off. I can't tell you, Rob, how many times, because I've run out of the number. I can safely say hundreds of times over the years, I've run into people who have mentioned 9/11, and they've all said basically the same thing. It was so comforting because we didn't know what was the world coming to an end. We didn't know. It was so comforting to hear voices on the radio that we knew.
Exactly.
Local people that we knew. You and Andy Udman and Mike Stubbs and Steve Garris and all of us who worked that whole thing. And so to me, the proof was in the pudding right there. That proved to me yet again the power of that local connection. And I'm very proud of what that station did that day. I've listened to the tapes of that day, and I have also, listened to the tapes and seen the videos of the network coverage. And I'm telling you, I'm not going to say that we were as polished or we had the depth of reporting that Dave did, but I will tell you that at the end of the day, our listeners knew every bit about as much about what went on as they were getting from the big networks, and we weren't just regurgitating their stuff. We were creating a lot of new information ourselves. So I'm very proud of that, and I'm very my biggest day in broadcasting. I can't imagine. Nothing ever came close to that. It was so remarkable. But it was the aftermath where people said, we're so glad we could still listen to you and listen to Andy and listen to Mike and listen to Steve. It meant so much to us to have people we knew talking to us about what was happening.
I believe there's two legs to the entity that we call radio. There's the AM stations and there's the FM. Both play an important part within a community. But when it comes to news, when it comes to weather, when it comes to traffic, when it comes to human interest stories, when it comes to what you need to know, community events, AM radio is where it is. And people just don't understand the importance of AM. And I'm for one, I'm very sad to see auto manufacturers getting rid of the AM radio on the radio dial in cars, because I think they're making a big mistake.
I think they are, in the sense that they're cutting off a potential new resurgence on that radio form. Mm-hmm. Now, and I know, the techie guys, well, the quality's bad, and, the FM's a much cleaner quality, and it's cheaper to pump out, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But those stations and the access that you have on the AM band, the local access that you have, if you're listening to people talking on AM or talking on FM, I don't believe that anybody can really tell the difference in quality. Oh, the guys with the massive stereo radio system, sure. The average guy, he doesn't care what's AM, FM, CDM, or XYZM. He doesn't care. They care what it sounds like and what's on. I know in my pickup, I drive my pickup around, and I discovered 2 or 3 years ago, quite by accident, because I usually keep it on the same local station here, I hit the search button in the middle of the day in London, Ontario, Canada. It went to the top of the dial, to the bottom of the dial, and came back up to my local station and never stopped once. That's how few stations are left that here would have had a strong enough signal to reach during the day. Back in the day, that would have stopped 15 or 20 times.
Yeah.
Now, some of those stations are still there, but they're farther away, less power, and they won't trigger the machine to stop at them. To me, that's the saddest thing. It breaks my heart.
What do you think about these people who are FM cronies who come to an AM station and try to convert the AM convert an AM into an FM format?
Well, you can do it, but my question is why?
Yeah.
Why bother? I mean, FM's not making money today. I know I have friends in the business side of the radio industry. Every time I say that, or I still occasionally go and do speaking engagements and whatnot. People will often ask me about, just as you're doing, what's the deal with radio, and it's got back to a few of them, and I've heard from some of them and said, radio's great, it's vibrant, it's this, it's that, it's something else. So learn to read a spreadsheet, Jack. These are all public companies, or most of them are public companies. Go and look at the spreadsheets. They're not making money. They're moving money around like Jack the Bear. In the old days, Rob, and you remember, you were there in those days, a guy with a local AM station who ran it properly, he'd be a millionaire in a matter of a few years. and just from doing that. And that happened all over this country to all kinds of people. And the reason that worked was because they could actually make money. It cost you this much money for your license, this much money to run the station, this much money to hire the staff, and this is how much money you bring in. And if there's enough over everything else on the bring in part, you're going to do well. And they did well. That's just not happening anymore. And I mean, I've been to presentations by broadcast people talking about, what a vibrant and exciting industry it is. Well, if it's so vibrant and exciting, why is the government paying millions and millions of dollars to newsrooms across the country just to get them to cover the news? I mean, what's that all about? Millions and millions of tax dollars being funneled to radio stations so they can, quote, keep them vibrant and keep them relevant. Well, they're not. People don't want to listen to them. It's not that there's a shortage of money per se. They could create their own money if they, broadcast stuff people want to listen to. But again, as we said earlier, it's almost like beating a dead horse. I don't want to give up on it. I think there's still room. I strongly believe in the local content. And what you were talking earlier about the FMs in the States, I think that's a fabulous idea. They don't have to compete necessarily with the big stations, the FMs, or what's left of the AMs. Let them come on and do just community programming, and they will do well. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
Radio has changed so much, and just recently, what was it, 4,800 people let go by Bell Media? And then they've cut certain areas out of their local noontime newscasts? Like, what?
Even a city like London, the London news here is a pale imitation of what it used to be. There are days when I don't watch local TV, so I can't speak to this authoritatively. People have told me that what little news is there is a pale imitation of what it used to be, and I guess there are days, maybe on the weekends or whatever, when we used to expect to get a newscast, and there just aren't any anymore. They're just not there. Well, they're not there because they're expensive to produce, and they don't generate money, and so we just talked before about that vicious circle, that once you start chasing the almighty dollar and everything else, all you can see is the dollar, and how many can I get at the end of the day? You stop thinking about what it actually takes to create those dollars, and you just think about how can I make it cheaper to get them, and you end up like we are in Canada, where we have this massively subsidized radio industry, and they're still losing money. It's just it's ridiculous.
The minute a radio station, whether it be AM or FM, puts the dollar in front of the listener, it's doomed.
Oh, it is, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you talk to any of the old-time guys, almost all of them whom are dead now, by the way. The Don Chamberlain, the fellow that you and I work for, just a wonderful, wonderful guy, and lived and breathed radio. Guys like Don, they understood what the medium was. It wasn't just about signals going out into the air. It was what those signals told the people at the other end, what went into their ears, and understood that they cared about what was going on locally. They cared about their what we used to call in the business the talent, the on-air people. They cared about them. They became their friends.
Yeah.
And when, as happened, it happened in London over the last, 10 years, basically all of the old guys are gone. Nobody's left. And they got these kind of plug and play. The young kids come in, and some of them are quite talented, but it's just they don't have the opportunity to build. And in some states, this amazed me. I heard a story, I can't repeat it, it's too long, but a story about a local station had a guy who was quite popular, and they fired him not only because he was too expensive, for what they said, but he was too popular. And they were concerned that he was more popular than the station was. Well, back in the old day, Don Chamberlain would have said that person is the station as far as the listener's concerned. Yeah, he is the station. However, there you go.
My good friend, please stand by. When we come back from this break, I'd like to talk to you about your NDE.
I'm happy to do that anytime.
All right, please stand by, Jim, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's great talking to a good old friend. Exonation,
my pleasure, Rob.
I'll be back with Jim on the other side of this break. Now, if you'd like to find out more about Jim Chapman, please visit. His website is jimchapman.ca, and that's JIMCHAPMAN.ca. And on Facebook, facebook.com/Jim Chapman 9237. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Jim Chapman and I return on the other side of this break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone, coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network and your hometown radio, Classic 1220, streaming around the world at classic1220.ca. Don't go away.
I heard you on the wireless back in 52, lying awake intently tuning in on you. If I was young, it didn't stop you coming through. They took the credit for your second symphony, rewritten by machine on new technology. And now I understand the problems you could see. I met you cheer.
Saturday night I was downtown working for the FBI, sitting in an Astor man with the bottles piling high. Bootleg and booze are on the west side.
So Nation, Jim Chapman is my special guest. His website is jimchapman.ca, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Jim Chapman 9237. First of all, Jim, thanks very much for joining us here on the X Zone. It's great talking about the golden days of radio with one of the most well, you were the king of the morning shows in London, Ontario, and I highly respect you in the way that you conducted yourself. And like I said, it's because of people like you and Bill Kelly that I do what I do today. So thanks, Jim, for everything you've done over the years.
Well, you're very kind to say that. I appreciate it very much, Rob.
Jim, you had a near-death experience in 1999, I believe. Can you tell us about that?
I did, and I will tell you, I want to say for your listeners, because you and I have chewed up this hour pretty quickly, anything that I'm going to mention from here on in, or if you want more information about it, I have written a couple of books, one of which is currently still being sold. It's called Come Back to Life, and you can get all the information about that book at jimchapman.ca. So if you're interested in more about what Rob and I are talking about now about the NDE, please do check that out. I'm going to do the very thumbnail sketch here, Rob. In 1999, I died of a heart attack in a local fitness center of all places, and they rushed me to the. I didn't die there. I had the heart attack. They rushed me to the hospital ER, where I very quickly expired and was gone for some time while they frantically tried to bring me back to life. And I know all the details of what happened there. They're all in my book because I went back afterwards and researched it all. At the same time I was doing the radio program, I was a columnist for the London Free Press. So I was an experienced writer, and I'd written for many years, and I'd actually written 2 books before this one. So it was all natural for me to do this, to put this down in book form. And what happened when I left this world, it was very, to me, very vivid and very dramatic. I was talking to the doctor in the ER, and he was looking at me kind of quizzically, and he said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "I don't feel well." And I closed my eyes, and I was gone. At that point, my heart stopped, and but I didn't stop. My consciousness continued, and I moved into another realm. I'm not sure. I guess realm covers it pretty well. Another level or kind of existence, and it was very real to me. Very physically real, tactile. I was outside, the sun was shining. I could feel the sun. I could feel the wind blowing on my face, and a number of things happened to me. But and again, they're all in the book. But I think the key takeaway for me these days, it seems, when I wrote this book and started to lecture, and I've lectured everywhere from New York to Seattle in the United States and Canada about my book back in the 2006, 7, 8, and 9 when it first came out. I did a lot of traveling and speaking. In those days, even then, there was a lot of reluctance on the part of people to talk about having had a near-death experience. Now, 15 years later, everybody's having them. Everybody's talking about them. Somebody said to me not long ago, "Well, do you think that people are just getting on the bandwagon? It's this is a cool thing to talk about. Oh yes, my heart stopped." I don't think that's it at all. I think the reality is, and if you look at the historical record, there have always been people having these experiences, going to a new reality, leaving this world, and then one way or another coming back to it. Almost always changed, generally for the better. For me, I certainly was. It absolutely changed my life, and in a very positive way. So for me, the big question that I get most often now when I go out and talk about this is, well, but I read this article where it says it's just chemicals breaking down in your brain. That's all an NDE is. And you can't argue with that. So, well, I'm not a scientist. I can't argue the science of that, but I will tell you this. When I closed my eyes, said to the doctor, I don't feel well, and then went through this period that seemed to me to be 15 or 20 minutes. In reality, it was only 4 or 5 minutes. It seemed to me about that long. When I was brought back, and I just snapped back. I literally, in this other reality, I blinked at something that happened. I blinked, and I was back in the ER, and the doctor was looking over me, and the nurses were scrambling around, and they've been zapping me several times. They gave up at one point and said, "Oh, let's try one more." And fortunately, I'm glad they did, because that's the one that brought me back. But I was totally cogent, and I had a long conversation with that doctor, and he told me later, he came to see one of my speeches or one of my talks, and came up to afterwards and said, "Boy, I really enjoyed that." And he said, "The thing I remember most about you, the only patient I ever had this happen to, only cardiac patient," he said, "when you came back, you were completely, totally lucid, and we picked up right where we left off when we were talking." He said, "I've never seen that happen before." Well, since then, I've read reports of that happening to lots of people. To me, when somebody says to me, "Well, it was just all the chemicals breaking down," okay, fair enough. So they all broke down, and I had this experience, and then they zapped me that last time and brought me back together. Those chemicals all magically go back together and bring my consciousness back. Is that what happened? I don't think so. Yeah. I'm not a scientist. I don't explain what happened to me. I just say what happened. So I believe very, very, very strongly that there is a life beyond this one. What it's like for different people, I don't know, because people have different experiences. But to people who are worried about it, who are concerned about it, my message is, do not be afraid of it. There's nothing to be afraid of. And that's kind of the driving impetus in my book, too. I have all kinds of people who bought it and written me and said, you took my fear away. It's so wonderful. I was so concerned. I didn't know what would happen. Or I lost a loved one. I was worried about what happened to them and so on. So again, I don't make judgments in the book. I don't try to explain in any scientific way. There's no religious, explanation for this is what happened to me. This is what I believe, and the book has done very, very well because so many people have said it really spoke to them and gave them a lot of peace. And if that's the only thing I ever do in my life, that for me is enough to have written that book and been able to share that perspective with people.
I think because of people like you, Jim, who will go out and talk about these near-death experiences that they've had, and that you do bring comfort to people who have questions about, well, what happens when I die? Do I just turn into, worm meat? That a lot of people who kept these cases to themselves are now opening up because they know they're not alone.
Well, there was such a stigma. How much time do we have, Rockabilly? I'm going to tell you a quick story if we have enough.
We have
a minute or so?
4.5 minutes.
Oh, that's time. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the speeches that I did a lot of them in churches. I traveled and did conferences and things, but I did a lot of them in churches. And one of the churches, the minister came up to me afterwards. I knew him vaguely. He was from the London area. He said, "I'd like to talk to you. Could you come into my office?" I went to his office. He says, "I'm going to tell you something I've never told another living soul." And he said, "I just listened to your speech. I read your book, but I had to tell you." He said, "I had a very similar thing happen to me when I was a young man, and I died, and they brought me back, and so he had been in a car accident or something. It doesn't matter." And he said, "I didn't know what to make of it, and people that I sort of asked without saying, this is what happened to me, everybody kind of poo-pooed it." And he said, "I did a little research, and there was a lot of writing about it. It was all hallucinations, and people were nuts, all these crazy people saying this stuff." He said, "I have never told another living soul that that's what happened, but after reading your book and hearing you talk, I know I have to do this." And he called me a few weeks later and said, "I need to tell you that X number of weeks ago, in my sermon, I shared the story. I talked about your experience, you having been there, because people were talking about how, uplifting it was and whatnot. He said, I shared that it happened to me, and he said, not a single person said anything negative, and dozens of people he had a big congregation, dozens of people come up and shook my hand and said, I'm so pleased you said that. Many of them said, I had a similar experience too, and I was also afraid to talk about it. So I think that's a huge and very positive change in public advocacy. Another one of the reasons why there's so many more people talking about it, so many more people are recovering. Our cardiac care in the last 20 years has just improved immeasurably. So many more people that would not have made it 20 or 30 years ago are being brought back now, and they're coming back with these wonderful stories.
We're hearing the same thing from people who are putting one-on-one together when it comes to reincarnation, Jim. We're hearing a lot more stories about reincarnation. And
reincarnation and the NDEs and that whole spectrum of another existence that we have kind of poo-pooed as a society, right? The rational, the Renaissance society and the rationality of modern man and all that sort of stuff, where the humanist element of philosophy, all of that stuff, where we said, well, if you can't prove it empirically, then it doesn't exist.
Right.
To me, the most interesting development scientifically in the last X number of years is what we're learning about quantum physics.
Big time.
And quantum physics tells us very simply that what we think we know is just a fraction of it.
Exactly.
Just a fraction. The things that we took for granted, this table is solid, and this is how the universe is built, and this is what atomic. It's thrown it all into the wastebasket. It's absolutely astounding. It's very tough to follow. I try to keep up with it, but I can't. I'm not smart enough. But drifting around the edges, you pick up enough about it. Things that we absolutely thought were true, or things which absolutely could not happen. Quantum physics is throwing that all into the wastebasket and saying, you guys haven't got a clue. So to me, the idea then that are there other realities that we can't access readily or don't access readily, I think only a fool would say no.
Yeah.
I think the wise man today says, it doesn't say, yes, I know for sure, but said, yes, I know there's more out there. And it covers this whole range of experiences that for years were written off as people being crazies or wackos or all of that stuff. And it's just, we were wrong. Society was wrong. And as time goes by, we're learning more and more people coming forward, more and more, so we say credible people, hate to use that word, but people with some credentials who are experiencing these things and coming forward and say, hey, guess what? So I think it's wonderful. I think it's tremendously liberating for the human soul and the human spirit. I know this experience released me from so much baggage I had to carry it around for the first few years of my life, and I see it, and my friends and people I talk to, and I belong to a church that takes this seriously, and they sell my book in the library, in the bookstore, and so on and so on. So for me, it's been what happened to me was singularly the greatest thing of my life, and continues to impact my life positively every single day. And that message that don't be afraid can make such changes to your life. So again, I don't want to turn this into a commercial, because the book is not a commercial venture. But if you want to know more, please just check out my website, jimchapman.ca. You can reach me there, and I'll send you the information about the book and how you can order it, and so on and so on and so on and so on.
Jim, the time has come when you and I must say so long for now, my friend. Please take care of yourself, keep up the great work, and love to have you back here in the future, my friend.
Rob, all you have to do is send me an email, and I'm there anytime you need me. Thank you so much, and I'm so pleased at your success. You certainly deserve it. You've worked so hard, and you've got a product that people need to hear and that they can depend on, they can believe in, and that's hard to find these days, my friend.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Take care of yourself. Regards to your family.
You too, and the same to yours, Rob.
Thanks,
Bye for now.
Bye-bye, Jim. Jim Chapman has been my guest, jimchapman.ca. I'll be back on the other side of this break as hour number 2 of the X-Zone continues right here on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, streaming at classic1220.ca.
Yeah.